right off the bat, I wanted to see, what those early days were like for you in Benton Harbor as a kid, and where do you think your interest in drama and playwriting and acting stemmed from as a kid?
Well, yeah, obviously, well, Benton Harbor, and I'm sure probably everybody knows one of the most, economically depressed areas in Michigan. They're still struggling, and I think the city went into a receivership or something. They're trying to get it back, but so it was. But when I grew up, in the '50s, it was, the city was still doing well and thriving, and for some people. But uh, we were, we grew up in the projects, poor, and back in those days it was segregated, so we had the white projects and black projects. But so it wasn't anyone who were around necessarily to inspire you to think you could be, in movies, or that was Hollywood was like Mount Olympus in Greek mythology or something. I mean, just those people were. But I think I've always enjoyed my cousin and I and friends. I've always enjoyed sort of acting. Back in those days, it was the westerns, and you sort of as you play out. Who's the good guys, who's the bad guys. You'd create these little stories, and then you kind of act them out whenever I can get somebody to to do this. So I've always kind of enjoyed that in school. In high school, I think it was a drama class, but in church, we had the little Easter plays and we had the Christmas plays, and I was always, because I was one of the few boys who went consistently, so I was always cast in those things to play a part, and they were, so in performing in church in the choir. Some people say you grew up in the hood, and I go, yeah, or I mean, I grew up, in a predominantly black neighborhood, but not predominantly, it was all black, but I grew up. I always say I grew up in church and I grew up in school
Hmm.
because pretty much, I was at one place or the other. Church was, pretty much certainly 6, 7 days a week. There was something going on at church, and my grandmother who raised me, I was very active in that, and then the rest of the time you were at school, and rarely, I mean, I didn't. My brother, I have an older brother who really had a lot of friends, and he hung out, and they did some really cool stuff, but I wasn't really included that much, so. But the church had a lot of plays, and of course, when in the church in those days, I'm not a church goer much these days, but I would sit there on the front pew, and we had all these ministers, these guest ministers who would come in, evangelists, who would give these revivals, and they sort of tell the stories from the Bible with their own interpretations, and they'd part of the dynamics of the ministry as they would act them out, and that was always fascinating. So I think it was a little bit of a lot of things. You look at characters. I had four uncles who were all very, very different from each other, and yet they all had these amazing strengths and these amazing weaknesses, and so their stories, I'd listen to their. So the stories are all around, but I think certainly the church and certainly the school and just with family. But you enjoy that. You don't think that you'll be able to apply that in any way that would provide a living. So pretty much, I grew up with the understanding that you're going to get a job, probably working in a factory, more like you're going to get a job working in a foundry,
Hmm.
and because back in those days, most of the clean factory jobs were segregated.
Right.
It was pretty much all white. I mean, if it was a nice factory, it was, and the foundry, the iron, the smoke, the whole thing. That was where the blacks worked, who didn't work on the farms. And southwestern Michigan is a heavy farm area.
Hmm.
When I was coming up, you go out to the fields, you pick the fruit basically to make some money. And I did that all the while coming up. And I finally got a job in a foundry in my senior year in high school. And so I went to school for, up until noon, and then I would run home, and uh, my brother would pick me up, and we'd go and work in this foundry. Um, and we worked there from, it was like 2 to midnight or something.
Jeez.
I mean, I don't know why I did it. I mean, I don't know, I could do it for the money, but I can't remember ever buying anything, or I bought a car or saving anything from it, but and I think one of the things they gave me a packet about retirement, and so after working 40 years, you could get 4 weeks vacation, and it's
Yeah.
just something about it. Just and really kind of my graduation was. I was saying when my graduation comes up, I wanted to, and they wouldn't give me the time off for my graduation, and I just like, so a bunch of, not a bunch, a couple of friends, good friends, we decided to join the Marine Corps. So we went over in April and signed up, and one guy didn't make it, and so such a different army then. He didn't pass the aptitude test, so and we spent the whole weekend consoling him. But me and another friend we got, and because that was in April, and I graduated the middle of June, or in June, and I guess a week after I graduated, I went to the Marines, and I thought that would resolve everything for me because I didn't want to work in the foundry. I couldn't keep doing that, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I finished high school, which is what my grandmother wanted me to do, but and I figured I'd figure all that out being in the service because once you went to the military, they paid for your education, and so everything would be fine. I'd travel the world. I'd get to hang out. Problem was I had asthma.
Mhm.
And oddly enough, I don't have any trouble with it after I got out of the Marine Corps. It's the weirdest thing, It's like it
Yeah.
disappeared. But I had asthma, as
Mhm.
a kid, and it never came up on any questions. So when I got there, I started having asthma attacks. The drill instructor forced me to eat some shellfish, and I had an attack, and it got worse. And so after 10 weeks, I was discharged and found myself back in Michigan. And
Mm.
and then it's like, oh, okay, so that didn't. So now I got, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? Uh, and I can go on. This is I'm sure more than information. But so growing up, I mean, it was certainly an interesting place and a great place to grow up. And I feel, even though I mean, it was poverty. I mean, there were times when we went through periods where there was no food. I remember going, I would do these fasts. I learned part of it was religious. In church, they would do fasts. But as a kid, I'd do these water fasts for 3 to 7 days, just. But then there were times when we ran out of food,
Mhm.
and you had to wait until I think my grandmother got $40 a month from welfare, and $30 went to the rent. And the rest of it, you had to figure out how you're going to make it through the month. But it was but those things didn't really concern me that much, and it didn't seem that unusual. And what my grandmother did was really spend a lot of time helping the poor, and I always thought those people were the poor. I never put myself in that category. I mean, because I felt I had, I mean, we were, I thought we were doing pretty good. I didn't really get how difficult it probably appeared from the outside until I went to college, and I looked back and I'm like, oh, okay, I mean, we didn't have a car,
Right.
just things that, but but it was, and my aunts and uncles, I'd spend summers with them,
Mhm.
but acting was always sort of around, it just expressed itself in different forms. Always I wanted to write, I think it was to tell stories,
Sure.
and it wasn't until I got to do a whole series of things that would take too long to talk about. I managed to get into college. Um, I went first to Highland Park
Mhm.
for a semester, And the deal with the consulate at Wayne State was if I did well, it was, then they would admit me to Wayne, and I did. And so I started Wayne State, and just fell in love with it. First off, just the idea that I could be in college was just so amazing to me. I mean, I finished high school with a 1.7 average, not because I couldn't do the work. It's just that I was working in a foundry, and I really, uh, my grandmother who raised me was born in 1895,
Wow.
and her thing was if you finish high school, then the rest is, you can have a great life. And probably in 1895 that was true.
Yeah.
It wasn't true in 1964.
Sure.
So I finished high school and did really, I did enough to graduate. But then after I got out, then I got married, and then my wife got pregnant, and then suddenly I saw my life just go nowhere, and I thought, oh my God. And then when I tried to get into college, I was turned down everywhere. But eventually, we got to Detroit, and Detroit was a thriving city back then. I loved Detroit. It was a great place. And we came in '66, and within a couple of years,
Went
just
down.
it just fell apart. I mean, it just the riots,
Mhm.
Martin Luther King. That was the first big thing. I mean, I got to Detroit. Literally, we stayed just off of Gratiot. I can't even pronounce it now. And it was a little street called Sylvester, and I
Okay.
got an apartment there for $40 a month. And then I worked a couple of the factories, and I just hated that. And then I got a job at selling insurance, and I tried a bunch of stuff, just trying to figure out how I could. But we had this little place there, and eventually we got a nicer place up in Hamtramck.
Mhm.
And but when I finally got into college, when I finally was there, and I took I had one elective, and I took an acting class, and David Rigo was my instructor. I think he's still around Detroit. No, he used to be at the University of Detroit, but I'm not sure. I haven't seen him in years, but and I just fell in love with acting. I mean, first time I walked on stage, it was just I just felt at home. I mean, I
Mhm.
felt this is you know, I can do this. I mean, I felt I was doing an interview a few years back, and a guy said, "Dude, it's great that you found the thing you love and you're able to do it." And I said, "Well, I can't really say I do it because I love it. I mean, I do enjoy the work that I do. When I'm given the opportunity to do it, it's the most fulfilling thing in my life. But that doesn't happen a lot, and but I do it because I can do it.
Right.
Between finishing high school and it seemed like everything I tried, I failed. I wasn't very good. I knew after a few months working at Foundry, I couldn't last long. I mean, I had a job. My job was shoveling dirt. I literally shoveled dirt for 10 hours. And honest to God, it was a big room filled with black dirt that you put in these, it was like a conveyor belt that had these cups, and it would go up and then dump out on a belt that the molders use that dirt to make molds. So I shoveled like in the basement, and then the dirt would go up and dump on the belt, and then the cups would come back down empty, and then and it went on all day, and all I did was shovel.
Wow.
Some people say, wow, I mean, you got big arms and shoulders. Yeah, because I developed all that shoveling dirt. I mean, it was just it was like the worst. So, but I tried so many different little jobs trying to find. I tried sales. I tried, uh, and I always felt so. And finally, got a good job after a couple of years in college with the Michigan Bell Telephone Company, and I was a communications consultant,
Mhm.
and that was really cool. They gave me a little green car. They transferred me up to Saginaw, and I had a little secretary, and I got to wear a suit and tie, and in my grandmother's eyes, I made it, but I just hated that job. It was just not good at it. I mean,
Sure.
just I loved sort of. I would go out to businesses and set up a telephone system for them, but then I'd come back